Oh, huh. Okay, so I'm still not really great with this technology stuff. Anyway, hi guys, I'm back. Um, and what I wanted to talk about right now, I just want to do a quick sort of introduction to your own brain. And in particular, I want to talk to you about your brain on anxiety. I mean, I can remember when I was a teenager, I think there was this ad that said, this is your brain, and they showed you an egg, and then they had a frying pan, and you cracked the egg in the frying pan, and this is your brain on drugs, and it's all frying up, whatever. So that's just what made me think of that. So I want to talk to you about your brain on anxiety. And part of the reason I want to do that is because we've been talking about anxiety, and we've been talking about different ways that we can try to mitigate it and bring it down. And what I want you to understand is that you can train your brain to react differently. Okay, so that's really important. You can change your brain so that it does not react the same way to things that it perceives as threats. Okay, so first of all, just a little bit of brain education. Okay, so let's say that this is your brain. Okay, and I know your brain's a lot bigger than this because you were all very smart. But this is your brain, and this is your prefrontal cortex, and this is your cortex. And the cortex is what you think of as your brain when you see, the man with two brains, or you see a brain in a chemistry lab or in a bio lab or whatever. That's the gray squiggly matter is your cortex, right? And then there's a bunch of stuff that's sort of underneath, right? And up in here, there's this little tiny thing called the amygdala. And the amygdala is what regulates your anxiety, okay? That's what decides for you whether or not you are going to fight, flee, or freeze in the presence of a threat, okay? Now, the thing about the amygdala is that it does not see very well. It's like a person who's partially blind, okay? So, but it has really good senses. So, in other words, your amygdala is what gets activated if you're driving along and you're about to be in a car wreck or somebody's about to hit you. That's what gives you that rush of adrenaline to get out of there, to move, to do something differently so that you don't get hurt, right? So it serves a really good function. The problem is that, so when you have a threat, so let's say when you're walking in the woods and a bear appears, okay? And your amygdala perceives the bear, perceives the threat, it shuts down your cortex, okay? And your cortex is your thinking mind. That's where your thoughts arise. The prefrontal cortex is where you make lists and where you make decisions. Well, when you're confronted with a bear, it's not going to be helpful to be making a list or to be thinking things through too much. You cannot think too much when you're confronted with a bear. You need to do something, right? You need to get out of the way. You need to look scary. You need to climb a tree, although that's not good because I think they climb trees. But anyway, that's the thinking brain getting involved. They're going, oh, wait, I could, but no, I can't, So meanwhile, you're being eaten by a bear because you spent too long trying to figure out what to do. Your amygdala says, we ain't doing that. I'm shutting down your thinking brain, and I am shooting you full of adrenaline right now, and you are going. Or you're going to stand up and look big, or you're going to pull out that bear mace, or whatever. So that's what your amygdala does when it perceives a threat that is imminent, right? Like me right now. The other way that your amygdala can get triggered is through your thoughts, okay? So this is where you have a thought, like probably a lot of us are having thoughts right now that are making us anxious. I'm thinking about, what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day, or thinking about what's going to happen if somebody gets sick, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for money or whatever. Those thoughts can then trigger your amygdala into thinking that it's under threat, and then it can send you into an anxiety spiral started off by a rush of adrenaline. And anybody who's ever had a rush of adrenaline because they were under threat or because they were having an anxiety attack or both, it's classic, right? You get the sweaty palms, your heart starts to race. That's because you've gotten some adrenaline. You get warm. You get a warm shot through your legs. The same thing can happen. You can have a threat in a dream, right? When you wake up and you've been being chased by a bad guy, and you wake up and you've got your legs are all warm and you feel and your heart's racing. You're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? That is your amygdala firing off. Now, the thing, just to back up a little bit about PTSD, about post-traumatic stress disorder, is what happens in post-traumatic stress disorder is that your amygdala has been fired so hard, maybe over a period of time, or maybe over some really, really intense trauma, that it then becomes hyper vigilant, and it starts firing off as if things are threats that are not threats. Okay, and your thinking mind can even say to you, and a lot of times does with trauma survivors, says, "Hey, we're not under threat anymore. Like, that's not happening right now." But you feel like you're having the same feelings as if it is, right? And so your amygdala reacts that way. So you have a panic attack, or you have an anxiety attack, or you feel anxiety, right? And that can also happen if, for instance, I made the analogy with Katrina, that you might be feeling a lot of the same way if you're a Katrina survivor, a Katrina transcender, that you do now. Even though the events are very different, a lot of the results are the same. And so because you're under some of the same threats, right, your amygdala is responding in the same way. And so you might start to have flashbacks, and you might start to have trouble sleeping, and you might start to have panic attacks or feel a lot of anxiety, so on and so forth. So this is why I want to continue to talk to you about how to intervene so that you can change your brain, okay? So understanding that there's two different ways that your brain can trigger anxiety in your body, which is what happens, right? Your amygdala gets triggered, it floods you with adrenaline and says, you are under threat, you need to be able to run or freeze or fight. And we're going to give you the extra energy and the complete focus to do that. But then it starts happening when you don't need it, and then it's anxiety, right? It's fine if you need to fight a bear, but it's not so great if you're standing in your kitchen trying to fix dinner, right? So that's one of the reasons that I'm going to post a video about thoughts. So we're going to deal with the two different ways that you can get triggered, and we're going to talk about different ways that you can begin to practice with particular methods that will actually not only calm anxiety, but will change your brain so that it stops reacting that way. That's the point, okay? And that's what we're going to do. So just to sum up this little bit, this was a little bit of brain training, talking about where your anxiety is coming from, that it can come from your thoughts, or it can come directly from your amygdala if it perceives a threat. Okay, like an outside immediate threat, like a dog snarling at you, or a bear coming at you, or a car coming at you. But we can, and let me stop right there. Like in terms of a bear coming at you, or a dog coming at you, or a car wreck, that some anxiety is good. We need our amygdalas to work. We wouldn't want to cut them out of our brains, because they do serve a really helpful function to help us survive, to protect us. So that's when we talk about anxiety having a protective angle to it. It does, that it's not all bad. It's just that when it fires off when we don't need it, that it becomes unhelpful. And that can happen because we're having particularly negative thoughts that feel threatening, or because we are having some kind of a sense memory or an emotional memory that is triggering our amygdala. Or it could even be a physical memory, like I talked, I think, in another video about smelling. So I just wanted you to have that background, because I think it's easier maybe to think about some of the things that we're going to talk about, and maybe even gives you a little bit more incentive to try some of these things, because they will actually change your brain. That we have proof of that now. It will change your brain. Your brain is much more plastic. It's much more pliable than we once thought it was. We once thought it couldn't ever be changed. Things were just things in your brain, but that's not the case. So on that happy note, I will leave you, and I am praying that you have a great day, and that it is filled with love, and that you can think of at least one thing to be grateful for maybe today. That's one way of starting to change your thoughts, by the way. So Mwah! Big kiss, big love. Bye. Before I get sillier.